Hey everybody, it's me, Professor Brentalpoops, and this, at long last, is Lyrics 101 with brentalfloss, Part 4. A lot of you have asked me, hey brentalfloss, whatever happened to Lyrics 101? And the truth is, a lot of things. First off, after I gave you guys that second assignment, I got literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses. And I don't know, I just kind of shut down. I felt like I couldn't answer them all. I couldn't give each one individual attention, but I didn't want to skip some. It just kind of faded into the distance, and I ask you to forgive me for that. Sometimes in a fine arts class, as a student, you realize that you're not really learning how to further your style. You're learning how to work in a style that pleases the teacher. And so by the end of the semester, all you've really gotten good at is doing stuff that that teacher likes. I was afraid of being that kind of teacher and judging your work based on how I would do it versus your style. So I kind of shut down. Recently at the Too Many Games, actually I've gotten this a couple times, Too Many Games and Acon panels, I was asked, hey, whatever happened to Lyrics 101 in my Q&A panels, and I was like, well, blah, 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 blee, 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 but my answers, on the inside I was thinking, that's all you got, dude? That's really why you haven't done it? So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do another one, and here it is. Today's video is going to be about a subject that I feel pretty confident in talking about. It's the music first lyric.
But brentalfloss, what's a music first lyric?
A music first lyric is where you add lyrics to a tune that already exists. Pretty much what I do with lyric series. Now in some ways it's easier to write a music first lyric because you have less choices that you have to make because the melody is what it is. But for the same reason it's harder in other ways because even though you have less choices that you have to make, you also have less options because that melody is not going to bend just because you want to use some word or phrase that won't fit. There are a lot of common pitfalls when it comes to writing a music first lyric, and I'm going to discuss them now using some of my own examples as well as some examples from work you guys sent in. Any words that you write to a pre-existing melody are sort of going to be a slave to the emotional content of the music. For instance, if I want to write a snappy, funny, joke-filled lyric, I probably don't want to use this. Why? Because again, the words might not match the mood of the music. Now there are exceptions to this. Sometimes it can be fun to have the words contradict the feel of the music. For instance, when I did Mega Man 3 Game Over with lyrics. The music's all bouncy and fun and happy, and the lyrics kind of dark and cynical, and some of the humor comes from the inappropriateness of the words relative to the music. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And sometimes a melody just does not lend itself to comedy. For instance, I recently did a panel that I do called Write a Lyric with brentalfloss, and the panel audience picked Gusty Garden Galaxy theme from Super Mario Galaxy. It's an amazing song, but the music was so full of emotion at some points that we couldn't really make a joke-filled lyric. It just wasn't chock full of jokes. We had to do other things with it, sort of to match that feel of the music. And the reason for that is sometimes when you're writing a comedy lyric to music that doesn't quite fit, if you keep on trying to write it really funny, it can either feel like the music's ruining the jokes or the jokes are ruining the music. So let's start with some examples. One of the lyrics I was sent was attempting to add lyrics to the athletic theme from Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Baby, 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 come jump on my saddle. Did you notice anything weird about that? The thing is, the music went bum 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 bum, and so it sort of inherently added an accent to that last note. And so if you're adding words, then the last note should be accented. So when you sing that, come jump on my saddle, it changes the word saddle, which is accented on the first syllable, to saddle. It's kind of like if somebody walked up and said, would you like a banana? And you're like, what? And they're like, would you like a banana? You would be like, I don't know what you're saying, until you realize they were saying banana. But if they said banana and didn't accent the right syllable, it wouldn't even sound right. This applies to lyrics too. Now, when you apply this idea to poetry or lyrics, it's a concept we call prosody, which I think I mispronounced as prosody in an earlier installment. Don't tell Sondheim. If you've ever been in an English class where they discussed something called scansion, it's very much related to that as well. The point is that good lyrics, especially comedy lyrics, should have natural prosody. And what that means is that the words naturally lay into the rhythms of the music like natural speech. If you're going to go against that and accent the wrong syllables, it should be for a good reason. For instance, like the character doesn't speak English as a first language or something like that. A replacement for the lines from this Yoshi song that I showed you earlier that would work better would be, "Baby, baby, baby, come hop up on my back." Another problem you may run into with a music first lyric is something I call thought fragments. Individual musical phrases often lend themselves to short, complete thoughts. Let's imagine we're adding lyrics to the Green Hill Zone theme from Sonic the Hedgehog. What if it went like this? "I'm running quickly through the Green Hill Zone in order to beat Dr. Robotnik and save the animals who are his slaves." Now, maybe that doesn't sound so weird to you, but to my ear, the lyrics would be better off setting individual complete thoughts into those 4 separate musical phrases. Something more like this. "Clearly, my name is Sonic. I'm quick and a bit demonic. I long to eat a milk bone as I run across Green Hill Zone." Now, while that might not be the best thing I've ever written, I want you to notice that those 4 independent musical phrases were also lyrically 4 independent and complete thoughts, even if the last 2 were strung together with the word "as," making them 2 parts in a longer thought. You can avoid thought fragments by making sure that almost every musical phrase that you add lyrics to could end in a period or a comma. If you end a musical phrase with a conjunction, an article, or a preposition, you are in danger of creating a thought fragment. Now let's talk about rhyme for a second. There is no exact science when it comes to where to put rhymes and how to use them, but there are a few principles and guidelines we can talk about that could help you figure it out. First, you should generally have a rhyming word or phrase at the end of at least every other line. These are called necessary rhymes, and yeah, that's pretty basic, I know. A little more complicated is knowing where the other rhymes go. One way to tell if you should use a rhyme is if one or more musical phrases have similar rhythm in close proximity to each other. It's kind of tough to explain in the abstract, so let's go to some examples. Do you remember the Hard Man theme from Mega Man 3? See, those first 2 musical phrases are basically the exact same thing. So if I wanted that first musical phrase to have the lyric, "Look into my steely eyes," the fact that the second phrase is musically and rhythmically parallel to the first would call for a rhyme. "Look into my steely eyes and you're gonna see I'm pretty wise." Also, if you wanted all of the last 3 syllables to rhyme in both lines, instead of pretty wise, you could say really wise. See? Steely eyes, really wise. Now let's take a look at a less obvious example. This tune is from that wonderful montage from the movie Up that made all the adults cry and the kids bored. The first 3 musical phrases don't have the exact same notes, but they do have a similar rhythm. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Okay? The fact that there are 3 in a row like that make it a great candidate for what's called internal rhyme. These are rhymes in between the necessary rhymes I talked about earlier. A triple rhyme scheme for these 3 phrases might go something like this. I'll go up there, up in the air, my head is square. Now, you don't have to do internal rhymes just because there's parallel musical rhythms close to each other, but it can help you decide where to put your rhymes if you're stuck. Another little trick that can help, regardless of whether you're writing a comedy lyric or whatever, is something I call backstitching. The most important concept when it comes to understanding backstitching is this. When you have one or more rhyming phrases in a row that all rhyme with each other, if you want a punchline to be in there, or a powerful lyric, a powerful phrase, or something that just really sells the idea of what you're writing about, it's better if it's the last line. And that's a structure you're probably more familiar with than you think. How does a joke go? Setup. A man runs into the doctor's office and says, "Doc, to help, I think I'm shrinking." Punchline. The doctor says, "Now settle down, you'll just have to be a little patient." Hey! So now that we know that it's better to end 2 or more rhyming lines with the most powerful or most funny line, that gives us a hint at how to construct it. Now let's say that you're writing a lyric to the tune of Mozart's Symphony No. 40. Notice how the rhythm of the first 2 big musical phrases is exactly the same, even though the notes are different. Now let's just imagine that as a lyricist, you've decided that you don't like Rush Limbaugh, and you're going to write a lyric about him being a huge jerk. Some rookie lyricists would just charge into that first line without thinking about it, but it's always good to know where your lyric is headed. So let's say that I'm this lyricist and I'm just determined to call Rush Limbaugh a butthole. Ending a line with the word butthole is almost always going to guarantee a punchline of some kind. It's just one of those funny words like nuts or head. So that means we should find a way to put it at the end of these two lines. By the way, it's always advisable to make the last line of a punchline the most operative word if you can. So maybe that second line would go da 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 butthole. See, it ends with butthole, just like our digestive system. Now we backstitch. If we know the second line ends with the word butthole, we're going to need something that rhymes with that for the end of the first line. So, I'm going to just choose the word subtle. It's sort of a goofy near rhyme, but I think it'll work here. Butthole, subtle. This is one of those places where writing a lyric can become like a crossword puzzle. You know one word, so that helps you with another word, and that helps you with another word, and that sort of helps you fill the whole thing out, just from that one first word. So we have our tune, we know that we want to use butthole at the end of the second line and subtle at the end of the first line. Let's fill it in. Mr. Rush, you're so plush, go and hush, dude. Take a turn, maybe learn to be subtle. Mr. Rush, you're a lush, kindly shush, dude. You appear to be clearly a butthole. Now again, that lyric is probably not going to win any awards, but I'm trying to make a few points here. Point number one, it's always good to know where your lyric is headed, whether that means where it's headed at the end of a couplet, or even the entire structure of your song. It helps you not hit a dead end. Point number two, if you have a couple of phrases in a row that rhyme, then you should save the most powerful or funniest for the last one. Point number three, as a rule of thumb, it is generally advisable to make the last word of a punchline or a powerful statement lyrically be the most operative word, which is again why that second line ended with butthole. Understand butthole? Okay, now I'm going to take us back to prosody for a second. Figuring out how to lay words naturally into the rhythm of a melody is not an exact science. When words have more than one syllable, it's generally easy to tell which syllable is accented. For instance, Wimbledon, scaffolding, and laughable all have an accent on the first syllable. Volcano, aggression, and dismantle all have an accent on the second syllable. Interfere, coalesce, and minaret all have an accent on the third syllable. If you set a word or a phrase over a melody that accentuates the wrong syllable, it's going to be harder for your audience to apprehend the ideas you're trying to get across. And if you're trying to do comedy especially, it's going to really put the funniness at risk. But what about single syllable words? Now, single syllable words are kind of the wild card of prosody. They can be accented, they can be not accented, but if you're going to accent a single syllable word, you need to make sure there's a good reason. Let's imagine we're going to add lyrics to Ride of the Valkyrie. I'm flying to a town, wearing a blue gown. I'm making the rounds, look at my hat. Okay, so that first phrase, I'm flying to a town, makes the word a sound really important, almost like you're giving some weird nickname to Atlanta.
Welcome to A-Town!
Occasionally you can get away with stuff like this, like in West Side Story. But in general, if one of the notes in a melody sets itself apart with a huge jump up in pitch, a huge jump down in pitch, or an increase in volume, or that kind of thing, then it's sort of stressing and highlighting that note, which means that the word that you attach to it is also going to be stressed or highlighted. You need to think about that. So let's look at line 2 of that Valkyrie lyric. Wearing a blue gown. Now, that one's not so bad because it stresses blue, which actually kind of helps with the imagery. Third line, I'm making the rounds. See, it stresses a word that's a connecting word, not an operative word. This is the kind of thing you want to avoid. Why? Because it doesn't sound like natural speech. So remember, the inflection of a sentence or a phrase really, really matters. I'm going to prove it to you with the sentence, I don't wish to shop for shoes. I'm going to say it in a couple different ways, accenting different words in the sentence, and notice how the underlying meaning of the sentence changes, okay? Here we go. I don't really wish to shop for shoes. 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 See how the underlying meaning changes when you stress different words in the sentence? Well, lyrical phrases are just like that. While, yes, you can get away with exceptions to this rule occasionally, it's just better in general if you try to mimic the character's speech, but also make sure that the way that you're stressing certain words and syllables reflects what the character is saying, both textually and subtextually, which means the underlying meaning. And that brings me to my final point in today's lecture. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the technical nuts and bolts of lyrics, rhymes and structure and all these things, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, you have to be able to step back and ask yourself, would this make sense even if it weren't a lyric? I call this a prose conversion. Prose, if you don't know, means normal sentences like how I'm talking now. This is prose. It doesn't rhyme, it has no metrical structure. This is prose. So what I want you to ask yourself when you look at a first draft is, do all these lyrics make sense even when I convert them to everyday speech? It's really easy when you're working on one little part of a lyric to lose objectivity about the whole, like an engineer on one end of a bridge, like, oh, this beam is starting to bend, but like the whole truss is breaking at the end of the bridge. It can be like that. As far as prose conversions, let's go back to that Yoshi lyric from earlier. Here's another part of it. Baby, 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 you look a bit aghast that I can float above and eggs come out my ass. We'll go on an adventure, it's gonna be a blast because it's from a plumber's past. So the rhymes here are decent, but it kind of falls apart in the last line. Why? Well, because when you convert it to prose, this character is basically saying, let's go on an adventure, it's gonna be super fun because it's from the past of a plumber. Now, think about that for a second. Like, what if I said, oh my gosh, you gotta go see this movie, and you were like, oh yeah, what's it about? And I was like, it's about a plumber's past. Would you think it was going to be a blast? Now, this problem could have been fixed using one of the principles that I talked about earlier, which is if you have parallel rhyming phrases right there in a row, then the last one should either be a punchline or powerful and something that moves the song along. So what if that same section of that lyric went like this? We'll go on an adventure right through a plumber's past. You know it's gonna be such a blast. Now that version doesn't end with the funniest line, but it does end with a more powerful line that pushes us forward to the next part of the song. Anyway, I hope this helped. I'm not going to give you an assignment this time. I'm planning at some point before we're dead to continue this series with people other than me who also write lyrics, because if you can have multiple voices and multiple opinions on how to write lyrics, then it might end up helping those of you that have a style that's different from mine, and generally making you more well-rounded in your education about lyrics, because I don't want you to become, students of the Brental school instead of just students of lyrics who are working on their own style, okay? So anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.